So, welcome to another episode of La Show Andy Part Sank, Part Shank, featuring
Perfect.
Andy on mute. So, I guess for this episode, we're going to reverse it. And I'm on mute most of the time.
Oh my god. That's not how that show works.
All week, I had to stand on my fucking head trying to come up with something. It's your turn. Do you remember the premises?
Dude, oh man. Now I'm like nervous as shit.
The map is not the terrain, language disguises thoughts. All models are false, but some are useful. Therefore, what does it matter what someone says? Well, it might matter if they're connected to other people who have accurate maps. Why might we need accurate maps and language? When we're in the presence of an environment and other beings. That's what we came to this week. Music maybe being one of the most
Yeah.
primary languages, and what are you communicating in those languages? Emotion. Right? Blah, 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 blah. So that's what
Yeah.
we've come to. What are all of the thoughts that you had while you were at work?
Dude, that okay, so if the map is not the terrain, I was wondering what the terrain would even be and how how it is that we would be able to communicate with one another in a way that is effective towards so I was not completely sure of whether the way that I communicate to you is the way that you understand the way that I'm trying to communicate to you. And if language this
If we were different people, it should be this. It should be different.
if we were different people, it should be, oh yeah, like the way I'm communicating is different than the way that you're interpreting it.
It would
Yes.
have to be, right?
Yes.
Because we're not the Borg.
Yeah. The board.
Yeah, like from Star Trek, right? Like they're just like different bodies being one brain, right? If we were just different bodies with one brain, there would be a one-to-one between the input and output, perception-wise, right?
Yeah.
But because we have a different schemas or different OODA loops and cultures and blah, 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 right?
Okay.
Although
Yes.
we might look like we grew up in the same place.
You
Right?
look really a bit. I don't know if that's racist or not.
You're right. But yeah, so consider this is something that's actually key to the discussion. And this is something that blew my mind. The callback libeler divergence. What the learner learns is a function of what they already know.
Yeah, because it's kind of like a blockchain, I guess, where you can only build on what you have. So
Yep.
And what you have is kind of formative in what you're going to be learning.
Well, here's what's interesting though. And this is where OODA loops come in. So you're familiar with OODA loops, John Boyd, fighter planes, observe, orient, decide, act, whenever
Yes.
we, right? So what if a miner could front run transactions by virtue of the fact that they have the transactions first? That's what's happening in blockchain right now. It's called miner extracted value, where they might see trades going on, front run the fucking trade, bam, there's your money.
So they're just getting the money like before.
They're acting on the information embedded on transactions that have yet to be processed.
Okay. But they're not the ones processing the information. Or they're
No, they are. The miners are processing the transactions. Okay. So it's like you giving me a trade, being like, I want to buy 1 billion shares of GameStop. And me saying, oh, you know what I should do? I should do a short or a call or whatever on GameStop, and then I'm going to win on that trade. Because I know the entire user's trade volume. So If you want to know how high finance works by trading on that information,
Mhm.
by your access to order flow. And now
So
it's
then you think
happening
you're
in the
still based
blockchain
on
space.
that information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right? So the way that John Boyd used OODA loops is that he introduced the element of confusion into OODA loops, knowing that he had inferior tech.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
You know,
That he's not. See. Okay. So with that OODA loop thing, then how are you supposed to observe when you're not completely sure what you're observing? Like that's, I guess,
well,
my.
this is why we have a network of dolphins around the world to echolocate information in maps and language.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So
Because
just to
your
confirm.
perceptions are only as valid as the way those perceptions have a real world impact on other people,
Hmm.
right? Is the oil over there? Yes. How do you know? Well, it's not in my car, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
I mean, I guess it's not in my car is not the greatest way to think about whether or not
But
something is
that's
accurate.
but that's how they want to operationalize it, though, right? Like I know of a hedge fund that has satellite data on all oil tankers in the world.
Okay.
That's how
And
they're
they
tracking flow of oil prices by
okay.
watching the ship go across the ocean. I'm being like, you know what, this guy's gonna run out of oil now, and therefore, if that tanker is there, therefore we infer.
And then they bought. I mean, aren't there laws preventing them from like changing the price of the oil before it like gets
Don't quote laws to men who have swords.
there?
Magnus Pompey, right? There are
Where did
people
you
that are
say that?
tracking the flight patterns of executives to predict M&A activity.
Oh my god! I think these are wow. I feel like that opened up a whole a whole other concept of
If I
just
know
where
the
we
shit,
can go.
imagine all the shit I don't know, right?
That's even
It
scarier, to
just
be completely honest.
right. So it's kind of one of those things where that's why I kind of constructed this because in all of these spaces you have people LARPing, right?
Hmm.
You have people, influencers, reading off a teleprompter, and then influencers below them repeating what they said from the teleprompter. Neither of them caring or knowing who wrote the script.
Yeah, and that's where
And it's a
the
farce.
question.
Because
Yeah,
I edit video, I can make you look like a hero, villain, sidekick, mentor, depending on how I cut anything up. And
oh
so in
my
a
god.
world like that, what right? I'm gonna
Yeah.
believe Mr. Teleprompter. Why? Because you went to what? Why? Because your face is symmetrical? I'm gonna listen to the way you interpret a teleprompter? Get the fuck out of here. Right? And then some other people try to pass off their teleprompter speech as their own original thought, and you're like, get the fuck out of here. You're like one Wikipedia article deep on this shit. What are you talking
That's
about?
where I'm wondering, like,
What are you talking about?
people might be able to, or people might be unable to differentiate the idea of what they're reading off the teleprompter and what is like their own genuine thought. They might be thinking that their own genuine, like what they're reading off the teleprompter is actually their own genuine thought when
When
that
I
might,
say it, it's original thought. When you say it, it's mimetic. It's Gerard,
um,
right? But for both
yeah,
of us, it's mimetic. Anything that I'm saying to you, I probably heard from someone else, right?
or read from
Or
or
stands to
whatever.
benefit me evolutionarily, or stands to benefit my portfolio, right? But we kind
Yeah,
of throw that out the window when it's on TV, even though we know all of the slots are bought and paid for.
but oh, jeez.
Being in media is fucked because you're
Being
like,
being me is
oh,
freaking scary, man. Like, having all that control is fucking terrifying. Like,
we can't have a discussion if you're just going to repeat teleprompters at me. You know what I mean?
yeah, then
Because we could just let the teleprompters do that. Why are we talking? You just post your teleprompter and I'll post mine, and we'll be able to avoid all the problems of the world by arguing about them.
This is making me think of like the two computers that like develop their own language thing. I'm like wondering if like the two teleprompters are just communicating with one another, or that's like
Gerard
another.
would say yes. Gerard would say yes. Memeticism means that we are espousing values that we believe will increase our social status and what happened. Well, we all always have a contingency plan for things like this.
Can you hear me now?
Crank Lucas be cranking.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Nice.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice. Um, uh,
Okay.
we were talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
So, in a world where the people at the exchange are halting the trades that they themselves have just exited,
Mhm.
what are we talking about? It's a farce.
It's
And
them
that's
just
and that's Robin Hood for
dehumanizing the
you,
system.
right?
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do? Go to fucking one of the other Robin Hood members now and have them create a company? What is that ogre guy? You have him create a company? You can't even string a sentence together, right? Robin Hood's
Yeah.
supposed to save the world, and turn that Robin Hood backstabbed the princess at the last moment.
Did it? Okay, this is like me just going off tangent with like a Robin Hood story, but like, do you think that they help the people?
I don't think we ever hear the denouement of Robin Hood. You know what I mean? Like the story. We hear the
Mhm.
climax, right? But you don't hear like after about how like the people from the forest don't know how to run the machines and they all go into disrepair, and then the sheriff has to come.
That's something that I've never even conceptualized. I'm like, oh no, like everyone that eats it is happy, man. We're good.
Insert company country from I'm not gonna say it, right? History is
Um,
the only true psychology.
uh, do you feel like comedy kind of enables people to be a lot more manipulative than they were beforehand? Or do you feel like that would like awaken like a inner whatever
The the Joker, the scientist, logician, and the artist are all manipulative.
in their own right? Yeah.
It's because they are all Russell conjugating. They're doing an emotional conjugation, right? One says
Mhm.
strongman, one says president, one says strongman, one says dictator. They could all be the same person. It just depends on which side of the thumb you're on,
Oh jeez,
right?
that's like a little hairy.
Right? That's what the emotional conjugation. You are not provided any additional information, yet you emotionally feel different. And so
Yes.
that's how the triptychs, the Joker, the logician, or the artist smuggles ideas into you because you don't see the active affect in the message.
At what point do you think that people would know that they're being programmed or being led on to some certain way? Like, do you think that people are cognizant of the way
People
that
don't
they
want
are
freedom;
being?
they want a fair master.
Shit. Fuck. Oh man.
When everyone's on their knees, nobody feels like they're bowing.
So, so then, how do people find out that they are even kneeling? You know what I mean?
Well, first of all, they when you kneel with other people, you find strength in it,
Yeah.
and especially if you get to treat everyone who's standing up as the enemy.
Why would you want to treat them as the enemy though, instead of
Be-
as an
be-
example? You know what I mean?
because someone has told you that the people standing up are committing a sin. Mine
Why
are
are we in this
bowing.
box? Why are we in this box of what's it called? Of being complacent with following the crowd instead of liking the opposition.
Well, it's because, again, language disguises thoughts. Keep in mind that what they say with their mouth is not actually what's going on in their head.
Okay.
They're feeling, like for example, when you look at people's opinion about the vaccine, these are
Mhm.
political discussions using scientific words,
Yes.
right?
That a lot of
This
people
is
don't
not
even
a
know.
scientific discussion. These are a political discussion with science words. There's a difference. I don't know if
Yeah.
people have figured that out yet.
I don't
They
think so
still think
either.
they're having scientific discussions, yet none of them are scientists, right?
And none of them have resources for the most part.
Like I've talked to PhDs in molecular biology that have
Mhm.
worked in agriculture, that worked in zoology, that have placed magnets on top of cells to try to fix obesity in mice. And you like, there were
You
people
know,
who actually know about it. And
naturally.
as a recruiter, I take for granted that I'm constantly talking to people that are infinitely smarter than most of the people who do what they do, or else I
Mhm.
wouldn't be talking to them, right? You know?
That's something
And
fun.
so you can have, it's like kind of having a conference with 500 people. So you could have everyone on stage except one person, right? Now, that one
Mhm.
person might not even be at that conference because they hate conferences. But that one person could invalidate most of the thought that happens on stage. Make sense?
Yeah.
Right?
And then,
Because they
yeah.
have exclusive access to information, right? Now, at the
Yeah.
same time, you know, in an ecology, we have different types of symbiosis, right? Mutualism, commensalism, parasitism, right?
Mhm.
Same thing in human affairs. Rent seekers are considered parasites,
Mhm.
right? And we even
Yeah.
look at and we even tax parasites differently than other people. We'll say, okay, capital gains will give you preferential tax treatment than other forms of, right?
Yes.
So we
Wow.
should expect if the behavior exists in the animal kingdom, it should exist in the human kingdom,
Yeah. That makes sense.
right? If dolphins suffocate beluga whales or whatever, we should expect the same thing in human beings,
Okay.
right?
So would a general person be able to differentiate whether they're being parasitic or whether they're being their own
See,
organism?
even with how you describe your relationships, that will be an emotional conjugation because there's it's affirmation bias. If something good happens to me, it's because I did it. If something bad happens to me, it's because of the environment. If something good for
Mhm.
you happens, it's because of the environment. If something bad happens to you, it's because of you. So we have a bias to kind of paint ourselves and other people as heroes and antagonists, so to speak, right?
Ah, yeah.
I mean, this is why people hate Ayn Rand because she was like, when we look at how man creates morals, he creates it based on how he gets fed, and so his morals are arbitrary, in my opinion.
Jeez.
She
That
saw
like
it.
really opens up the floor for like understanding like people that are like deemed evil or any other random thing like that.
Well, I think when we say evil, we commit atrocities to each other on a daily basis.
Literally all the time.
All the time, we're committing atrocities to each other. It just other people have more power and it's more visible, right? As a recruiter, I don't put too much stock into the moral affectations of people,
Hmm.
right? Because I've seen that Ted DiBiase, everyone has a price, right? So,
Sure.
and there are entrapment laws because of that. There are literally laws that say, look, if you offer 10 million bucks, don't blame the guy. That's 10 million bucks. Are you nuts? Who wouldn't take 10 million bucks? Like, there's literally laws like that.
Yeah. I'm over here thinking like, man, you're talking about laws right now. There's people with swords. Like,
Right? I think they
yeah.
call it lawfare.
Lawfare.
You like that?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. You must be at least this funded to ride this train.
And that like bars out so many people without them even knowing too. Like a lot of it is ignorance. Like a lot of people are just really freaking ignorant.
It's hard for you to know it until you were in it. Right?
Yeah.
I've actually worked in the industry. I've had licenses. I've actually taught the courses for people doing the exam to get licensed to sell the stuff. And then when I saw, then when I did my research, I was like, I'm gonna give up my license. This retail guillotine is fucked. But that was 10 years ago. You know, I read Jack Bogle's thesis, 1955.
I thought you